All right, I'm gonna try it like this. I don't know if it really worked, but let's just take a look at what Dr. Andrew Huberman has to say.
Complexity is really when we restore our ability to analyze
Neuroscientist.
duration, path, and outcome. Now you think about buds and you go, no wonder they sleep deprived. They're trying to figure out who has the ability to control these mechanisms and who doesn't. Most people fail. So when I think about how to recover, I actually don't think about recovery as its own thing. I think about recovery as giving buoyancy or improving my ability to focus. So sleep is a turning off of these brain circuits that are thinking about what's happening next. So some people experience challenges in falling asleep. They need to learn how to turn off thinking. And there's actually a way to do this. We're doing a study on this now. It relates to hypnosis that would be fun to talk about. And we can, if you like. Yeah. The other thing is that just merely going into panoramic vision, say between a meeting, instead of looking at your phone, more focal vision. You're working hard on your book. Maybe you walk to the kitchen, just 2 seconds of what I call deliberate decompression, where you just kind of let your mind go broader, will allow you to reset your focus much more intensely when you return to that book, as opposed to if you look at your phone or engage even in some other kind of deep duration path outcome type function of the brain. So when you start thinking about meditation, it's also valuable because a lot of meditation involves focusing on your breath. I actually think a lot of people are spending out this ability. They're working too hard in the activities that are designed to reset them. So the 2 ways to reset yourself in wakefulness.
Being just very adamant about my meditation practice.
That's right.
Because it's a letting go. It's not
right.
It's we're so programmed to like force ourselves to do things or to like dive in with intentionality, but so much of this is more elusive than that.
I think that we can all do ourselves a great service and perform much better in what we're doing by taking little micro recoveries in the form of dilating our gaze in between meetings just for a second. Viewing a horizon is the best way to do it because it naturally brings the eyes into defocus. We're doing this in VR because we can control the visual environment completely. When you go into this defocus mode, you turn off that brainstem circuit, you're conserving norepinephrine for your next bout of focus and activity. Otherwise, you're spending it. And the brain doesn't care how you spend it. Doesn't care if it's on Instagram, doesn't care if it's watching the news. But learning how to defocus and then refocus very quickly can get you through a race that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to get through. It saves you energy and it builds energy. The other thing is we talk a lot about sleep, and sleep is extremely important.
Okay. So I'm gonna just try to get it back real quick. Figure this thing out. Okay. Reclaim host. There we go. All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So, were you able to hear him?
Yeah, I took some notes here.
And okay, so based on your notes, let's just start from there. What were you seeing in that he said?
Well, the biggest standout was that he said recovery is improving my ability to focus, and I added my own ending to that. It's to focus energy.
Right. So energetically, this whole thing is kind of emanating from the inside, and so that's what this little fire here on the unlocked man represents.
Yeah, and that's the passion portion.
Right. And so that spark within you to actually do something with your life, it is consistent upon what you're actually intaking, and that is based on the 5 senses, in a sense, generally for most people.
Right.
The five senses. So what most of us do is we look out into the reality and we see something and we instantly label it or contain it for purposes of functionality. Really, is what our species does, because we're not in the state where we're aware enough to really process, like 11,000 bits of impressions every split of a second. You know what I mean? Or whatever
Right.
that math is, where they're saying, we're taking in so much information that we're only using about 40 impressions out of like 11,000 that we take in every second.
Right.
And because we are only taking in such a narrow scope of the reality, then basing our decisions on what we interpret from the reality, this is causing an internal status. So that status is controlling your entire environment. Whether or not the environment is so much conducive to that doesn't matter, because we're such a species where, like he said that they're working on in VR, virtual reality, because they can control the environment, they said. Okay.
Right.
So the thing about us is that if we go to the movies and there's a tiger that jumps out, whether that tiger was in the movie theater or not, there's this thing that happens, what he was talking about, in the autonomic nervous system. So with that being said, it triggers within you a chemical reaction.
Right.
Okay. That chemical reaction is what feels good or does not feel good. So this device our species carries is a way in which we are able to interpret the reality more fully if we understand that our feelings are always pointing to what we are thinking, and what we are thinking is directly affecting how we feel.
Right.
So,
and I'll add to that too, real quick.
go ahead.
Something that just connected for me, I remembered this, is that thoughts and feelings can actually alter sensory experience.
Right.
And I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I
No,
first
exactly.
I went to this neurolinguistic programming course about 7 years ago or so. I went to this course, and one of the processes that we were taught was this technique called mapping across. And essentially, it's the process of consciously taking a sensory connection in your brain and mapping it to a different sensory experience that you've had in another experience in your brain, and then connecting those two wires in the brain. So whenever you then have that same experience again, the wiring's all kind of messed up, and you can use it for training new behaviors. So I haven't drank soda in over 7 years. And it was a decision. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to drink soda. So that's the first part. Obviously, you got to make some sort of a decision. And then, the action piece, which is the part where it says alertness plus focus equals a change in the synapses. I thought that was genius, because it's like, at first you become alert, you become aware, you become awake to the idea that you want to change something. That's where decision and choice can come in. And then there's that focus, which he calls work, which I love that. It's like duration, outcome. I'm forgetting the third one, but he talks about that work piece. I mapped across the sensation in my nervous system of what it's like to drink Tylenol with Dr. Pepper. So back then I used to love Dr. Pepper. That was like my favorite soda. And I did this process where we, again, connected the sensory experience in the brain through this kind of visual, kind of embodied experience, where then I associated the taste of Dr. Pepper with Tylenol. And I went and tried it out after I did the process and took a sip. I remember I was sitting in this Wendy's outside of the conference center, and I took a drink. And at first it tasted like Dr. Pepper. And I was like, oh, this shit doesn't work. And then after I started swallowing, I swallowed down. It kind of felt like that syrupy cough syrup when it was going down. And then my stomach started getting upset, just the same as if it would when I had Tylenol. And I felt sick to my stomach, and I never drank soda ever since then. And it reminded me right there, wait a second, not only that's where I think some of the power can come in, is whenever you realize that, thoughts and feelings and sensory experience, like you can influence what you're experiencing. So anyways, I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah. And I believe if you can understand that at a deeper level, it shows you what Inception was, the movie. And that's why I think it's so important to watch The Matrix.
Yes.
The Matrix, Inception, and Interstellar, like in that order.
Yeah.
And because the same thing he was talking about with the hypnosis or bringing the mind into a subtle state, it's like that is what takes you to a place where you can get on the train. Okay, the cosmic train, right? Where you're flowing with higher intelligence that's always present right around you within the field that you're in. And so being able to relax your inside, to have a calm environment, right? You unlock your mind, so you unlock yourself to the ethers, the world of possibilities. Now, in this world, there's unlimited potential, of course, right? So the situation man finds himself in is he knows about that world, the unlimited potential, because he sees other of his species achieving things newly, or they say we're finding out about Mars, we're going, so he says, to himself, at least he can recognize that there's something that is going beyond. And now the way in which to get to that place of possibility and to get to the beyond is to go beyond the sensory perception, and we can use our senses to change the way the neurons fire if we're aware of that. But that is such at a deeper level of the human and of the species, to be aware in that nature, to where you're saying, now I'm going to change this with this and cross the patterns, the way in which the neuron would have fired. You're like, okay, we're going to, just like in cartoons, like they'll be chasing after each other, then one of them will be ahead, right? They'll stop and they'll change the track to the other way. Yeah. And they'll keep running the way that they were going. Then when the other one comes behind, it goes a whole nother way. So that's what happens with you. Yeah. And this happens unknowingly as well, what we call subliminal. See, the subliminal is what we're talking about. The subliminal, getting down to this area where you can influence, this still water within you, and you can't get there focused on turbulence or the wind, the thoughts so much. And what he wasn't able to really get into about everything that he was saying, because he was like, basically our species has to go within and figure out how to use its device to understand its reality, to where we can become a mechanism in which the whole totality can funnel higher intelligence through us, so that we can go. It's not about growing new tails or wings to fly. It's about being present enough to have the insight to be available to where, whatever is needed of you from the universe at that time can come through you.
Right.
And that's keeping this space kind of clear for that. So when you're wanting to, like you said, have a right decision, right, or a right choice, it's important that we understand how to focus. So it's just like, before a sniper takes a shot, sniper cannot go and then take the shot. Sniper has to really, like he said, decompress. And right where the sniper touches that water, and for a moment walks on that water in the psyche of the mind, that's when he can get the shot. And it's not even him doing it. It's at that point the whole all of the internal elements have aligned with the moment in time for the universe to because when you do the math on it, a lot of times it don't even make sense with the wind,
it doesn't make sense.
how far off, it don't even make sense. So what happens is there's an intelligence that wants to use us, and it's not like spooky shit. It's more like everything you ever wanted, and life becomes this thing of surrendering. And this is what he wasn't getting into. He kept giving the science.
Right.
Giving the science, but what we really got to do is we actually have to break the ego. And
Can I pause you for a sec?
Yeah, go ahead, for sure.
So I'm getting this connection, just personal connection, when I'm looking at that visual on your shirt. So I'm seeing the still water, and I'm seeing how it's right there at the head, and then it kind of, there's like a kind of like a separation point, but then there's also a connection down into the neck, and then it flows, obviously into the rest of the body. That kind of point, that's like the base of the head, the atlas, and then the lower part of the spine, kind of where let's just say where it connects in the back, where there's like that kind of intersection point of the four, where it's like a darker color, and then it intersects with the shoulders right there. So on I think I told you on my spine, my C6 and C7 are fused, right? And so that part of my vertebra is fused. And then when you said the cracking, I've had this vision for a while for myself, and I don't know exactly how it's going to happen. I have no idea. So I'm putting this into the universe when I say this, that I believe that at some point, I don't know, it'll be some medical breakthrough, some sort of a science. I don't know what it'll be, but it's going to be something, right? And something is going to cause that fusion to separate, and it's going to restore original function. And there's going to be an energetic a physical process, of course, but an energetic process where there's going to be a connection between literally the head and the body for me, that I feel like it's been, it's there. Like, obviously I'm aware of it, and the focus, and so my focus on around that and getting that restoration for me is something that's my want. That's my intention. That's my want. I'm putting it out there.
And I'm glad you said that that's your want, because I wanted to start there and deal with this now. Okay. So you have within yourself a desire, which naturally comes about as a part of the species. But here's the thing with desires: they're to be played with, in a sense, because if you want it so bad, well, what you start to amplify is the want or the lack of the thing.
Right. And it stirs up lack. Yeah.
And or resistance in that sense. And right. So we do this without even knowing, because we're thinking like, no, that's my real intent. That's what I want. I want that thing. And what we do is we take ourselves out of the present moment and we project ourselves into that moment where there is a break and there's an alignment and then there's a reconnection. But there's only the now that what you want can have access to you. Okay. There's no such thing as the future.
Right.
It's a psycho dynamic, if you will. And
Sure.
to the universe itself, there's no time. You know, when your calendar changes, that doesn't happen. You know, that's
Right.
that's your navigation of self, if you will, of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And it's useful, just like the ego is useful in many senses, by way of the ego will, you know, make you swing back if you get punched, or the ego will, sorry about the noise in the background, but the ego will make you brush your hair, brush your teeth, you know, as understanding not only that that's what you must do, but also that it's it's what keeps the image. And so
Right. Real quick, I'm gonna jump in on that real quick.
Go
So
ahead.
one of the things that he was saying earlier in the interview that really resonated, that's kind of in line with what you're saying, is how the nervous system, which the brain, the body, you know, it's all connected. And so the nervous system is constantly looking for a way to automate and to integrate those reflexes into the autonomic system. I actually just got a book on it's called the Symphony of Reflexes, and I haven't read it yet, but one of my good friends, that guy I told you about before, the older Japanese man who's in Aikido and different things in my men's group, he recommended that book for my daughter and for my girlfriend's son as well, because, you know, you can see the reflexes kind of in children a little bit maybe easier, because as adults, like myself, I'll speak to, I have these different mechanistic processes that replay, you know, they repeat and they loop. And, you know, it's kind of like kind of hardened, if you will, or the patterns, you know, it's gone down that groove so many times. And so it's kind of integrated more into my person. Whereas with infants, you know, it's like all kind of like meshed into the ego and meshed into like identity and stuff. But whenever the kids are little and they don't have that part developed yet, you can just see these reflexes that play out. And so it's easier to kind of, hopefully in the book, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm imagining it's going to be something about, you know, awareness and then modification and then integration of these reflexes to make the nervous system more harmonized, right, as a symphony. So, yeah, I mean, as we harmonize with the universe, with the external world, I liked how he was also talking about how dopamine, these different neurochemicals play into kind of the reward systems. And I can see in my own life how I have been, my devices, if you will, have been hacked by the external, because if there isn't that external validation or reward or whatever, whether it's through social media or a sales incentive, I'm in sales, whether it's like some monetary thing, whatever the carrot and the stick is. And I'm finding, as like my person internally, the only sustainable, for me at least, the only sustainable mechanism is relationships. Like that's the only sustainable mechanism for energy, for nervous system, you know, regulation, if you will, of happiness and fulfillment and all the kind of good, positive experiences that I want to have, are all attached to a co-creation with another human. And that co-creation, whatever that is, whether it's just like the enjoyment, I mean, it doesn't have to be an outcome, right? But that's kind of how my, you know, my conscious thinking brain wants to like make it outcome oriented. Like, what is the outcome of it? You know what I mean? Like, which is good, it's fine, it's good, it's all that. And I'm finding that sometimes the the panoramic vision that he talked about, where you can kind of like zoom out for a second, you know, for me, that gives me, I guess, more peace or more kind of calmness, where I can drop in, hopefully, to that still water level, where I can be fully present, and then not only experience, you know, myself in a different way, but experience how I am in relationship with you. And that's always going to be a unique experience. That's always like going to be something that is more novel and kind of dopamine or reward seeking or whatever you want to call it, right? It's always going to be more rewarding than any type of kind of like canned, packaged, deliverable like thing, you know, like it's just, it's in the moment. And that present moment and cultivating that present moment with other people, I experience it as vulnerability. I experience it as, if I'm honest, I experience if I'm really trying to get there, as a level, it is a level of surrender. It has to be. Because I have to surrender what I believe. If I'm really going to have a conversation with you, Q, I have to be willing and able to surrender what I expect or what I think or what I'm, you know, whatever it is, like that mechanism that's going inside of me that's trying to, like, you know, create something like I don't know, like, and I have to be in that place of like, I don't know what this conversation could go, right, for it to get somewhere. You know?
Wow, that is beautiful. The last piece of what you just said contains the whole essence of what we're talking about. Really, it's like, as much as you want to have a knowing about your outcome, what's going to happen with you, you have to remain in a state of where I don't know exactly where this is going, but maybe that's how you get there. It sounds crazy. It sounds crazy, but that's how this thing really works. And it's when you have the hold on getting there that you impact your nervous system to where it gets thrown off, so much to the point that it can cause disease. And that is what's happening, is people are constantly projecting themselves out of this moment with all of their energy, which is what they are. Is they're an aware. We are awareness. We're not really a body. We're not really yesterday so much. We're not really tomorrow, but we are able to have this awareness of thoughts, of the body's processes, of this moment, of things beyond this moment. And so we must understand that what we are is not really to be contained or confined or defined, rather, but more so experience as your nature. So here's the thing. You are like, I want to have better relations with people, right? And you found the word, which is vulnerability. And vulnerability, why is it even vulnerable? Well, the ego.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Because the ego comes up. The ego comes up almost like throw up out of the body, to where you'll cry about it. You'll have these tantrums about it. You may drink about it. You may smoke about it. But all it really is your processes on the inside. And so while you may be seeking a reward, you are maybe projecting a lack. And so what happens is you backfire, in a sense, because you are not in a place where you're gathering your full awareness and focusing it, like he said, to where you collapse. You collapse the two eyes into one, and laser beam focus to actually produce a result, if that's what we need. But we understand that the results are already there within the feeling. And so if you can go more feeling based about your environment, then you can actually have a more better relationship to the environment and those subjects in it. Now, that being said, you cannot really do that without the inner work. And that's where, man, for thousands, since we've been here, the inner work has been avoided. It's been manipulated, hijacked by the ego, because every time you reach a level that, especially in the West, it's like a trophy. You know, I did this thing, you know, I learned how to silence my mind. You know, that becomes a trophy. And then it loses its power because it's not the essence of the thing, which is what we are. We are the essence of the thing. It's like that great saying. It's like the wise man points, you know. And so they say very often, you know, people look to the moon, and then some might even look at the finger, but really it's the whole thing. It's the fact that he can point, you can see, have an interpretation of all of that, the space, the spaciousness that we are. That's what he's pointing to. You can't really, there's no words for it. Right. So most great teachers have only done that. And if you only do that, that should be enough. But it will never be enough. It will never be enough because the ego is constantly seeking the outcome or the reward of the thing. Right. This is why it's called the mind. Because the ego is minding you for your feelings. And it's doing this not as a method of, you know, to fuck you, but it's happened by way of conditioning. And the conditions
and it's all,
are...
real quick to jump in and to tie it in, like he talks about this place where you have to get to the work, he calls it, where there is almost like an agitation, right? There's an agitation, there's an emotion that you said it's being mind, right? And that mind that emotion that's coming up, that is a part of the potential gold that can be, you know, it can be harnessed temporarily. It can be let go of. Like you can do different things with it as a magician, as I am a magician, you know, like I'm pretty, I feel like I'm pretty tuned in. However, I totally resonate with the part where it says, the part where, not even it says, the part where I experience my avoidance, my resistance, my ego, not wanting to go into the work, not wanting to look at the emotion, not wanting to look at what's underneath of the emotion, not wanting to apply my consciousness and my spotlight of attention and focus to. However, that is the next.
Yes, perfect. No, this is perfect segue. Okay, so the work, I've heard this now, like from different factions, but there's like
practices,
one lady, there's like one lady recently that I was listening to. I don't remember her name, but she actually has a whole little thing called the work. Like that's her thing. Yeah. And it really is the work because, and we probably shouldn't make it that, you know, because that's already putting emphasis on
the resistance, the challenge,
right. You can feel it already, you know, you can feel it already. And so what it is really, and this is where I was heading things, and he didn't get into it. Maybe he did. I didn't watch like the whole first hour.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of jumped in, caught like at least 30-40 minutes, but I'm going to go back, you know. But what happens is, you know, it's just something that where my life has taken me recently, whereas the work is who you are. See, that's who you are. It don't matter if you're doing the work or not. the lack of work you do is who you are, and the work that you do is who you are. And you got to find the balance, because there's some that go off into this work and they're still achieving in the background.
Mm-hmm.
They're still seeking this thing ahead of themselves or outside of themselves, outside of now. And so for that to be said, there's this realm where you have to start to, and this is where we're at, right? We are right here, right now, in the dead heart of this situation, where things that come to you as, like, oh fuck, man, I cannot take it. I can't take this. I can't take this. This shit sucks. Whatever you're saying, and your position internally is here, and so you are constantly at war on the inside against emotions that you don't want to feel.
Sure.
Right? And if you notice him, his hands, palms open, right? I get into that, but you're constantly fighting emotions that you do not want to feel. And that is making you who you are too. That's
Yes.
making you all the roles that you play in society. So when you come up to somebody in the store, you get this interpretation of who they are and how they should act. And if they don't, then there's an emotional response to your own interpretation.
Right.
And your other bodies, like a pain body, that Eckhart Tolle talks about, your other body is they're minding too, just like the emotions. So every potential drop, every potential thought really wants to gain a momentum within, to have an influence, to have a life. We all kind of want life here in a sense. And so all of your potential emotions want form, and they get more form by feeding of the thought, which is energy.
Yes.
And you could become in a trap, not a trap, but you could become stagnant in a cycle, a vicious cycle.
Right.
We call it insanity, but not most people are not checked in. But you get trapped in such a vicious cycle. That's why he said you can tell someone, oh, you're gonna lose your kids, and they still will do the thing. And it's because
Sorry, go on. That
and
just triggered something. Yeah.
and it's because of this thing going on within without no attention to it. And it gets deeper, because these emotions are actually, this is the next level of our species right here. And it has been.
Let me
Hold on, I'm going to say this and then you go. This has been the next level, and will always be, because what we are is to be present. And so through the emotions, by you actually going through them, can you get to who you are, not rejecting or running from them. Go ahead.
Amen. That's it, man. Yeah, because if not, it just repeats itself until the process is worked out. Really, it's bound. That's what we call a trauma, if you will, or it's bound. I mean, all energy. One of the things that I learned on the physical as well as the mental, even in spiritual, that's where forgiveness comes in. Really big, which is the process of releasing that bound up, story, or if the mental, the bound up, emotion that's stored in the tissue, the bound up, like it's at all levels, and so like forgiveness is been a big, I mean, it's difficult, right? Because it's like, I want to times, not I want to hold on, my ego wants to hold on, like even even saying I want it assumes ego. Like that's what it is. And so it's like, okay, well, as I've developed some of these different like tools and mechanisms, or not even developed, that's ego again, but like as I've borrowed kind of these frameworks and ways of kind of conceptualizing and understanding for my own journey, right? So I can understand, why I get trapped in certain patterns, or understand why certain things happen on the external, and how my internal, experience is influencing that, or even how, if my lack of egoic projection would then, like, for instance, one of my favorites quotes is, whatever you resist persists, right? That's what's coming up. It's like, oh, I resisted that external thing, and so therefore it, like you said, it was informed, like it took form, right? It took a form because of the resistance, arguably. And I mean, I say arguably because it kind of goes both ways. It's a cyclical thing, right? It's like, it's not just one way, and so one of the things that it brought up in me, that you were talking about patterns. So like, I have this book here. I don't know if you can see it. It's called Human Performance Matters. It's my company. And basically it's my operating system manual that, like, I developed in 27, like, again, it's developed. It's like, it's my own version of other people's kind of content that I've amalgamated in my own experience and gone, okay, this is the language that for me fits. This is the framework for me that fits. And so anyways, the process that came up was one of the processes in the book. So the book that I was reading about, and it's called the addiction cycle. So it's a cycle because it's a pattern. It goes, so it's preoccupation. You get preoccupied with something, distracted, like you're preoccupied. Then the ritualization, or the pattern of it, autonomic, response, you act it out. And then the key, I think, that binds a lot of it is the last one, shame and despair. So I've often heard different, like, philosophers or people talk about how, and yeah, I've even experienced like low levels of despair. And I think a lot of people at some level experience low levels of despair on a regular basis. I was listening to Jim Carrey the other day talk about it. He struggles with, depression and different things. And he's talked about how, he feels like there's a lot of us that go around with this low level of despair. And I was like, oh, raise my hand energetically. Like I really, relate to that. And the shame piece, I did some work around it in 2015. And when I truly released it, that shame piece, when I tell you the level of internal calm that I had, and the internal peace that I had, and I say had because, I've since, in some certain ways, picked up certain patterns, or kind of like lost track of, kind of the belief that kind of allowed me to kind of experience some of that freedom from shame. Some of it's been conscious, some of it's unconscious. Like I say, the shadow of humanity is shame. Like, shame is what connects everyone. Like the main thing that I see in this world right now is people connect through their problems. Like they connect through, oh, this is going bad, that's going bad. Like that's how a lot of people connect. And it's a pattern. I think it's a cultural, like a bigger pattern that plays out. And I've studied and tried to understand, like, why do we do this as humans? Like, why, and there's biological reasons, and like there's all these different reasons that it plays out. But what I'm seeing in my own life, and a lot of other people, I think probably as well, is these low levels of despair. Like, we're not connected. Like, we're not, like, we're like, the obviously the COVID, like all the things that are happening right in this world right now, it's causing division. It's causing, this increasing kind of despair, and arguably even shame, right? Shameful activity, like things that a lot of us are probably going to look back on years from now and be like ashamed of, people doing certain things and acting certain ways, you know what I mean? And
Right.
so there's a lot of this that's playing out, and it's like in my own life, I see that's one of the patterns, like they're in, the addiction cycle, But anyways, I got off on a tangent, but
no, it's right where we're gonna kind of wrap it up in a sense. So you said the word that I'm going to use, which is shadow, and and I heard you doing something that I know is the same. Sorry, the dogs are barking at each other.
Yeah.
But I heard you doing something that that is, in a sense, is a pointer to the ego. And see, because the ego will catch itself.
Yeah.
I'll say that again. The ego will catch itself. So you think you caught the ego, but the ego is actually hidden itself behind who you think you are. So your sense of identity is coming from a place of reward. Often you need to be rewarded or stroked. But what I'm telling you about the ego is that it can say, oh, I did it. You know, I said ego. I allowed this development. See, it can hide itself behind the speech that's coming out of your mouth in order for you to feel, for it to feel more alive.
Usually it feels like it's usually a safety mechanism. It's like,
right.
It's a protection.
And so this is where it gets interesting, because see, there's no fighting, there's no catching it, it's just like this. And this is where we're going to really put it together. There's a study, I don't know exactly what the study was called, but they were basically in the lab, and they were trying to understand why sometimes an electron will act as a particle and sometimes it'll act as a wave, right?
Yeah.
And they couldn't understand why it was like randomly selecting, and then they started to realize that it was by way of the observer, so because they would notice that it was doing this thing, and then they wanted to record it. As soon as they invited the recording instruments, that is when the particles would actually change their function.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is basically what happens in us when we bring awareness to the ego. It kind of shifts its function based on your observation. And if you have a hold on that, if you have such a tight hold on, oh, I got to catch this motherfucker, it's like, it's, that is it. That's its way of hiding. So what I'm getting, what I'm pointing this whole thing to, also, there are a couple of theories in here that I'm planning on putting out, but it's called the shadow mind.
Okay.
The shadow mind. And so you are this light, right? In a sense.
Okay.
In the mind, right? That's your level of presence or awareness to the reality. And around you, you can maybe, sense shadows. And, these shadows are some of your lesser thoughts, if you will. Your lesser behaviors, your less, the things that you quote unquote don't like. And as they're moving.
So real quick,
go ahead.
And the work that I do with the men's group, we do, that's the main focus of them. We're called the New Warriors. That's the project, the New Warriors Project. And so the organization, we call ourselves New Warriors because we believe that the battle is fought within, it's not outside. And so as a new warrior, what we're going to battle typically, there's different language around it, like, all the stuff you hear, like accountability, integrity, purpose, mission, those kinds of things. But then the real piece of the magician's work, which I feel like is what we're touching on right here, which is shadow work. So shadow, we define as something you hide, repress, or deny about yourself. That's kind of the language. So it's like, okay, so if I'm doing my shadows work, then I'm taking a look at what it is in myself currently that I'm hiding, repressing, or denying.
And that will really help you in understanding what I'm saying too, because those are in a sense what the shadows are, and they've gained a momentum in a sense for you to even call it what you're calling it, because in a sense, none of this has to be as serious as we're making it.
Right.
Like, we don't have to be a part of anything except this now in its totality. And but what I'm getting to deeper is the shadow. The way this I'm interpreting the shadow mind is that most of us are looking to do this work, right, to fight, but it's more like this presence thing, whereas by way of this being light in a shadow mind, it's to say that if you cannot maybe flinch at the shadow of your mind, the things you're thinking, and then getting that nasty feeling, that's how you know it's a shadow, those nasty feelings. And so if you're not reacting, you're more responsive by way of presence, you turn the light up, your presence. And what happens when you turn light up? It dissolves the shadow. It dissolves the shadow. There's no fighting. There's no fight. See, but when you actually think the shadow has form, you think the shadow has form, you think it has power, then it can be very scary. But if you're aware of just being aware, if you're aware of just being aware, this in a sense is raising the light, illumination within. And this is why they're calling it enlightenment. In light, in man. So in the light within, you turn it up, you raise your frequency, and therefore the shadow's frequency can't exist at the same. If your frequency is here, shadow frequency here, they can't tether at the same. Okay. So that being said, most of the despair, most of the suffering within us is our ability to have a environment that those things can't even exist in. You get what I'm saying? Because these things cannot exist by way of frequency, which you said we started with energy. So if my energy is at a degree, see, most people think, oh, I get my energy up and I don't never have to come around. I don't ever have to be around stuff that I don't like. No, that's not, that's not the case.
Opposite.
Yes,
opposite.
Yeah, right. Yes, maybe you may become fortunate enough to attract magical situations, but the real magic actually is going to be in the situation where you think that you shouldn't be, because you might have said, "Oh, I'm so holy now. I should only be having holy experiences." Well, those experiences are actually in the mud. They're in the shit.
That's true.
They're in the heart of the problem, or the heart of the matter. And so as you begin to go through your emotions and you go through these things that you don't like, you begin to not have any, their control over your lessons, to where they're still there, but they're just really like I can think of, I used to see myself die all kind of ways. Like my mind would project that only to hold on to some sense of it was some sense of identity. It doesn't really matter what type it is. It's as long as it can have a sense of identity. So even if it's destructive, it's still a sense of identity. Nobody wants to be no one.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that is how you get to access everyone. Like what you want to do is, so you have to learn how to be nobody. And that's why the ego has such a big problem, because that's like death.
Yeah.
And you're like, what do you mean you're not going to have any it's not to say that you don't have ambitions. It's not to say that you don't have
intentions and
things that you're going after, but where it comes down to is now you have to learn how to let go of those things as if they don't matter,
Mm-hmm.
Listen to this. You let go of them as if they don't matter, and somehow they come into matter.
That's exactly. It's called the set it and forget it, like thermostat.
Right. Set it and forget it. And to become so well balanced in that you don't have to necessarily jump from this place to that place all the time, which is freaking that nervous system out. When you're able to be fully present and fully within this now, then you have that access to the ethers, which I call the unlimited possibility of a thing. So
I think you're right. That's where I'm moving towards is, and I've had these kinds of conversations in terms of with people in my life who've kind of one of my friends. He said this to me before. He said basically said, I don't think you're ready yet. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I don't think you're ready basically to be a nobody. And I said, I think you're right. I said, that's a hard place to be.
That's amazing that you said that like that. Keep going.
I was like, that's a hard place to be, and I feel like at moments that, that God, the universe, whatever, has been able to use me, and I can recall those and I can tell you about those, but the thing is, it's really just me chasing that feeling, or that like, wow, that was so, but to do the actual work that it takes to get into that place where I am clear, like you said, in that space, like I'm clear in my heart space. So I'm able to make clear-hearted decisions, right? And be able to listen to that intuition and to move in that intuition and have that faith, right? So it's like a story that's coming up for me that I got to share with you. That I've shared with my family this morning, actually, that really resonated for me in regards to faith, hope, and love. So about 3 years ago, I was going off on my own, starting my own company for solar, for consulting. And my first referral, my first, sale was this lady named Hope. And I went in, presented, it went okay, I thought, but ultimately they ended up not going with me. So I guess, it didn't go that, the outcome wasn't what I wanted. And during that meeting, she introduced me to her friend whose name is Faith. And so we met, three of us. And then at church, I was at church that Sunday, and the pastor was giving a message, and he was talking about 1 Corinthians. It talks about faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. And so I was like, I talked to my buddy who is a missionary guy, this pastor, and I said, hey, I was like, I just listened to this message, and I met this hope, and I met faith. And he goes, your name is Jonathan, or John. The Apostle John in the Bible was symbolic of love. That was what he represented. And he's like, so that was the meeting of the three: faith, hope, and love. And today, actually, in a couple of hours from now, Hope is finally getting her house surveyed to get solar on it 3 years later. I've been, casually pursuing her for about 3 years now. And one of the things that I'm realizing is that, like, just with all the different things that are going on in the world and all these different, and just my own perspective on things, hope has been something that has, and faith especially, has been something that's been really challenging for me to, kind of experience and be in touch with internally. And so on my own journey, I'm just seeing like external kind of reminders and symbolism and stuff. And I'm very much of that kind of person where I labels and names and meanings, I definitely, grab hold and link onto that. And so I don't know exactly, like I'm just kind of making it my own interpretations, right? Obviously, what this all means. And so, yeah, I mean,
well, that is definitely your way of realizing how powerful and how magical the experience can be if you let go. 3 years of letting go got you to this place today with hope. So or it could have happened sooner if you could have back then saw the resistance that you may have had, you know, because it's my first one. I want to get it, you know, I'd like to get my first one done. Whatever was going on, you were probably projecting a lot. And then here's the thing too. The universe doesn't hear what you think you're projecting. So very often you think you're saying, I want this thing, when really there's no or yes to the universe. It's like, okay, that's the frequency. Okay, we're gonna, and then it doesn't have to do it just because you actually do match the frequency. It doesn't have to do it right away, because there's already a certain balance and an ebb and flow to where, you know, maybe you getting it at this time would throw the whole
right.
this whole song off, right? It's like if you play that note before it actually should come in the song, it throws the song off. And this song is your life. And so as life begins to throw you notes, you cannot say, oh, I'm not going to play that note, I want to play F minor. You start to mess up. So now you're beating your own drum. Bum, bum, bum. Life is trying to go do 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 do, bum, bum, bum. And what I'm saying is, you have to learn how to go bum, 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 doo 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 doo, bum, bum, doo doo, bum, bum, doo 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 doo, bum, 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 doo 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 doo. You have to integrate yourself,
right,
so that the drums that you're beating are conducive with the whole orchestra of life. So the universe is tuning itself through all of us, through the emotions, it tunes. And so when we avoid them, we're causing dis-ease in the whole process of the music, if you will, the music of life, or the flow of life. And so when you are able to kind of understand that all of what you are is all of what this is, and that's more than enough, it becomes this thing where you do things that you're supposed to do without actually doing them, because the doing is the ego, whereas the action or the reality of the situation may just be that you're relaxed. You get what I'm saying? Or maybe you're working 16 hours, but you don't really feel it because you weren't in this intensive mind state where there's an outcome. So the more you, like you said, the more you can do in your regular daily activity, where you're not looking for outcome, where it could be just washing a cup.
Yeah.
You're like, nah, I just want to wash this cup, get it done with. When you start to wash cups and maybe just get lost in the suds or in the process, because the washing of the cup could be like the driving of the road, where your mind, you know how when you drive you get calm?
Yes.
Same thing, what you got to learn how to do with a cup, or with your daughter saying, Dad, 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 Dad. So then you're not looking for just only rewards. You're also accepting of the suffering that you must endure too, because it's more through the suffering that you'll find out who you are. Rewards, when they come, usually they're short-lived. You're like, you work so hard for a thing, it comes, you're like, yeah, but then it's over and you're looking for the next thing. So
I will say that, I would say that's been true of my life, that I mean, I've heard it, said, it's like a saying, but it's true that there's typically a lot of grief in growing. And, my experience, the reason why is because it requires a letting go of the past, of the beliefs, of the story, of the, the trauma, the tension, the physiologic, whatever, whatever it is that's being held on to grow into the next thing. And so that process of letting go and that loss that comes up with it, and that emotion of sadness and fear that comes up in me. And even when I was a little kid, I made up songs of lamentation, I call them, because when I was 2-3 years old, I would make up these sad songs, and they were just silly, but they're songs of my heart, so they're not silly in that way, but they're, a kid, kind of made up. And so my song, I'll sing it here, is, I miss the good old days. They were so happy and joyful. when my uncle used to bounce us on the trampoline, just like, so they would be like, and I would just keep going, like making up, like I didn't have, I still don't have really like a lot of musical talent, but I just was like, that was my heart. My heart was crying out for those memories and like trying to hold on. And, as I've gotten older and realized a lot of my journey is grief, a lot of what I'm going through right now, that's required, I believe, for me to get to the next stage or phase or formation in my life. It has to do with grief. It has to do with being in touch with that part of me that is grieving, and to stay humbly connected to it, because it is a very humbling experience to be in grief. I mean, it's the most humbling experience to be in grief. And so I could go into I won't go super deep into it, but I do want to share this with you, just in the conversation is kind of taking me to that vulnerable place. But the vulnerable, it's scary, man. Like, I'm going through some baby mama drama. I know I haven't told you anything about this, I don't think, but I've got a daughter. She's 16 months old, and there's all sorts of grief that I'm experiencing with baby mama, and the emotions that are being projected onto me, and then triggering things in me, and feeling a lot of feelings, man. And so that, for me, it's like it's a fuel source, kind of like you were saying earlier. Like, the grief, in a sense, is fueling me, and it's fueling me to keep growing, really, because I have to. It feels, that's what it's almost like, that's the pattern. It's like I grieve and then I grow, I grieve and then I grow. And it just keeps it's working for me, but it doesn't feel like it.
Well,
It
that's
doesn't.
that's what it is, man. It's the story that you're telling yourself in the head, and then you're reacting to that story, and that story can only change by way of going through the story, like how you're saying, and believing that there is a loss, and that there was this thing that's happening, because all of that, we can go up to another level and see that that's an egoic standpoint, because you don't really lose anything,
Right.
and you don't really take too much, in a sense, except for the experience. So from that's the grand vision, and then what you're talking about right now is a more myopic, it's closer. Yeah. So the way in which you can kind of zoom in and zoom out on your situation is what's going to help you with it, because it's serious. Your daughter is your daughter, right? But she is a being here too,
right?
And at some level in the consciousness, she needs this type of environment. Otherwise, it wouldn't be.
Right. Yeah. No, and I do that. I do zoom in and zoom out of it, and that's really the best strategy. I agree.
And also, you get to a level where you look and you say, the baby mama is giving me drama. You look at that and you'll actually be able to thank her for the drama, because she's giving you the portal,
right,
through which you can actually transcend. And
well, the thing is, it's so true, because her name is Gigi, but she's got 5 G's in her name, so I call her 5G. That's my nickname for her. So she's my hyperconnectivity to growth into the future and possibly the apocalypse.
That's amazing. That's amazing. All of that entails. I wanted to say I only have like 6% of the battery, so it's probably right at that point.
Tipping point.
And just what you said right there, is being able to see in your relationships the people that are really these door holders. They're like this, like they spoke about Yahshua being a door, a door. So they are doors. They're doors into yourself, And they're the ones that you don't like. They're the ones that are annoying. They're the ones that are not doing everything you want, how you want it. So that is the practice. That is the work. But don't let it make you miserable.
Right.
That's the game.
That's the game. Yeah. That's the game. Yeah.
And if you can play with the best of them, life becomes really magical.
Oh, let me tell you real quick on this. So I had this thing. I won't even go into the details of it, but I'll just say I had this interaction with her last week. That was, I kept my cool in the moment, didn't say anything stupid, like did everything mechanically right. And the emotions were very hard. Like I was just trying to contain them, so I didn't say or do something that I would regret. So I played it out as best I could. And then I left the situation. I was shaking. Like I was shaking with, anger and grief and fear and just all these negative emotions. And that's when I went and I met with this lady, Hope, and I closed the deal. Was when I had all this emotion. I had all this. And one of the things that my boy Tony Robbins always says, he said that the one with the most emotion is the one who influences the conversation. And I thought how true that is. And so she's been a portal of emotion and tapping into that 5G, like that part of me that's like, hyper connected to the emotional body. And that's a reservoir. Like I call myself the energy guy, because I can tap into these energies and really experience them, consciously go there. And she's been a helpful part of that.
And I love that you see that. The more that you see that in other people, that's going to give you that speed that you're talking about, that hyper dimension. Last thing I'm going to say is, in the hyper dimensions, you have to relax.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing to do. Yeah.
No. You have